You do not owe the world your power, sacrificed on a silver platter. Hello and welcome back to the Exist Better YouTube channel. Today we're talking about a bunch of things that I'm going to have a hard time defining, so we're just going to jump right into it. If you're new here, you can check out the links below. I do one-on-one work with people, shadow work sessions. I have a shadow workbook if you're new to self-development and subconscious work in general. And yeah, check out my website. There's a blog. There's tons of free content there. Today I wasn't planning on talking about this at all. I just knew I wanted to make a video because I haven't in a long time. And this is what started coming up really strong. And I didn't even really want to talk about it, but now I'm realizing that it is possibly the most important thing for me to talk about right now. And that is this split that I've noticed. So I've noticed this culturally and then in myself. I'm going to give you some examples in a minute. But basically this split between the martyrs and the people who get to have fun, right? So like right off the bat, you might think like, oh, like it's like good cop, bad cop, you know, like you might have had a parent who was the disciplined parent and the parent who was the one that like let you get away with everything, that sort of thing. And then if the parent who was the discipliner found out about the other parent's behavior, they would like kind of shame them or guilt them and say like, no, stop doing, don't let them have too much fun or whatever. So I'll just tell you like a little story that popped up that, again, wasn't really something I ever understood or thought about too much. But now that I'm growing out of some of this stuff, it's become very obvious. So when I was younger, I would have this thing where I felt completely like trapped in a glass case. Like even if people could see me, they couldn't really see me. I couldn't really express anything. When I got older, I realized that the way that I could get out of this box, I could just drink alcohol and it would fix it like that. And so when I would drink, my sacral energy, creative energy, playful energy, we can talk more about that in a minute, but that would come out of me. And that's what was always kept in this cage, like 24/7. So that would come out and I would stop caring about anything. So like in like party atmospheres, I wouldn't necessarily abuse this or do anything wrong, but I would become very like gregarious, like talkative, like jokes, like just kind of like a little bit like center of attention type person. But again, not in a competitive way, like really not shadowy at all, like really just natural, like fun type of energy. And I would know, well, now I can see this clearly, is at these events, it would cause me a lot of problems. So men at the party who were sort of like predatorial type people would suddenly start to see me as someone that they could manipulate or trick into getting something out of. So this playful, fun, outgoing energy was interpreted by these predator types as she's someone who like I could trick into something. Like she doesn't seem very closed off, probably kind of like easy. So they would always like they would expect things to happen. They would expect me to like just do whatever they wanted. And then at the end of the night, they would find out like, no, I'm literally just enjoying myself. And they would get really mad and really sulky. Because they were basically saying, you owe me something sexual because you were expressing this sacral energy, right? The second thing I started to notice with, expressing this type of energy, I would finally let myself out of this cage and just be kind of relaxed and open and like carefree and anything goes, is that the women at these parties would not like me. And I could tell, not all of them, it was very hit or miss. Like they were either down with it or they weren't. So I would catch people, women specifically, just staring at me. Like actually seeming angry and threatened by the fact that I was having fun. And so I would notice these women just sort of like just watching me, probably making a lot of assumptions about the type of person I was. I would often wake up in the morning and the next day my eyes would open and it would just be like guilt and shame, like just a flood of guilt and shame. And at the time I used to think it was because of drinking alcohol, because alcohol's bad for you. And it was particularly really hard on my system, like it was really bad for me. And it was partially that, for sure, that was contributing to some of the guilt. But I now realize that the guilt was actually expressing this energy that was supposed to be kept in a box. So it was almost like this Catholic guilt sort of thing, where it's like, your creative energy is not your own. It is your husband's, or it's not even his, it's no one's, like it shouldn't even exist. So the reason I bring this up is because I think this is a huge problem for a lot of people, and it really like can destroy your life. So when we're talking about being in touch with sacral energy, so that playfulness, that creativity, that lack of control, that go with the flow, excitement energy, yes, it is tied to sexuality as well. If there's trauma in that center, which for a lot of people there are, it could mean a lot of things. So one, you are potentially hyper controlling, because loss of control can actually be a big fear. So that's one thing. Another thing is that when your creative energy is blocked, so is your ability to, let's say, I don't know, like start a business, find new ways to make money, use your talents in ways that are beneficial to you and beneficial to others. Because the creative, it's the creative force, right? Is the life force within you is blocked. So now you're stuck in this position. And again, this is like trauma we're talking about. If you grew up in a culture that was repressed, aka a religious culture, even if you personally weren't very religious, doesn't matter. If you grew up there, you were probably trained in this way, that your own creative energy is not okay, at the very least. Like there's some sort of story playing out. In my case, it was literally playing out in a million different ways, but literally, if you express this, predators come after you. Like this is how severe this can be. Obviously, maybe a little more relevant to women in that way, but this can be anyone. A lot of people are going through this. Men, women, everybody. Essentially, this is the energy of castration. Your power is literally cut off. I'm sorry to use that word to any men out there who are like traumatized by that word. So again, you have to start operating from the head up. Everything becomes mental. You always have to figure everything out. You can't feel your way through life. That's not safe. You can't rely on your intuition, because you've either lost access to it, or even when it does say something, you don't trust it, so you don't act on it anyway. You have a creative idea, but you figure out, what's the point? I'm just not even going to express that. No one's going to like it, or worse, someone's going to come after me, right? So all these sorts of things. And a lot of people have experienced this. So I want to drive home that this is a traumatic pattern. So if you have expressed this energy and it has been shunned or denied or attacked, you're going to automatically just separate yourself from it and say, like, I can't survive with it. Like, if I keep expressing like this, I'm not going to survive. your body and your nervous system, being very intelligent, they see that and they will just naturally cut you off from it and say, like, no more of that. Okay, that goes in a box, because we get attacked and judged and all this stuff when that comes out, so we keep that in a box. Now, what happens when we do this? One thing happens. We become martyrs. People with blocked sacral energy become martyrs. They live lives of martyrdom, because quite literally, every single day, the deepest, truest part of them is being sacrificed, which is their power. So coming out of this pattern requires a lot of awareness, almost like nonstop awareness as you're going throughout your day, because your natural inclination is going to be to separate yourself from your creative energy. And I don't even mean like creative energy in the sense where you're like painting or something. Like, it can manifest that way, but it really is so much more broad than that it's going to manifest in a million different ways. But what you need to understand is that it's you holding that at bay subconsciously. So you need to actively work to bring it back in. And so anything that you do that you notice contributes to a sense of personal power, this is very like sort of primal energy. So we don't need to get complicated. We don't need to think too much about this. Anything physical, really. Anything physical that feels good. Exercise, running, yoga, punching a punching bag, stretching, like anything that is physical and makes you feel like you are more grounded in your body is going to be a help. So that's like the tip of the iceberg, though. That's like one little thing. Another thing to note is, as you're coming out of this very, very, very repressed pattern, there can be this tendency to sway toward hedonism. So hedonism is this philosophy of, if it feels good for me, then I'll do it. So obviously we can see the downside there, like it can turn into overindulgence and all this stuff, but we're not talking about the downside. We're talking about this being part of a healing curve where we're coming out of martyrdom and we can start to swing into almost like self-centeredness a little bit, where it's like, I'm going to do what feels good for me. I'm going to indulge in the things that I like. I'm going to behave in the way that I like. And if it upsets people, that's really not my concern. Shouldn't be my main concern. So it's very tricky, because some people already do too much of that and they need to learn some other shit. But if you're watching this channel, there's a fairly good chance that you might be in the martyrdom part of this. So I'm sharing these things from the perspective of, you are someone who's stuck in the martyrdom role. If you're not stuck in the martyrdom role, going hedonistic and becoming selfish and all that stuff, that's not helpful, or that can be self-destructive, right? But because there's such an imbalance toward martyrdom, there can be this opposite swing in the healing process where we're just like, I just need to do whatever I want to do. Like, even if it's like being lazy or being overly indulgent in certain ways, like that is a lot of times just an expression. Like, so let's say you're like addicted to something, like rich foods is like a common one for this problem. You're addicted to rich foods because this part of you is so repressed. You're not getting pleasure anywhere else. So if you're addicted to a drug, if you're addicted to certain types of relationships, if you are in this particular pattern I'm talking about, you're addicted to those things because it's your only source of pleasure. Literally, you have no other source of pleasure. Pleasure is tied to this energy. It's all about pleasure. So, moving out of martyrdom, you could see some of that. Don't worry about that. Like, just let it be. Don't get caught up in, now is not the time to get caught up in discipline. Like, I need to keep myself within the lines, and because that's already what the martyr does 24/7. The martyr is always keeping themselves in order and making sure they don't do anything irresponsible and making sure they don't upset anyone, and on layer, right? Layers of guilt and layers of self-control. That's, if you have too much of that already, forget about discipline for a while. It's about getting back in touch with the fact that you do not owe the world your power. You do not owe the world your power. You do not owe the world your power, sacrificed on a silver platter. So if you are going about your day starting to get in touch with your power, kind of like I was at those parties, just enjoying myself, being happy, having a good time, feeling fulfilled, and other people are coming in and antagonizing that, that's their problem. That's their discomfort with that energy. So if you go into their psyche, there's going to be all this baggage tied up with sacral energy, needing to control it, needing to dominate people, who knows what. Doesn't matter. That's them. So your energy is yours to create. Everyone gets energy, right? Like everyone who comes into this life has their own storage of energy. So yours does not belong to anyone else. Yours does not need to be given to anyone else unless you want to and you find pleasure in that in some way, right? So all of these things sound incredibly obvious, but we are not living that way if we are living in martyrdom. And with martyrdom, there's this subconscious idea that it's going to pay off, right? Think of religious stuff. Like, one day I'm going to suffer enough in order to be good, or suffer enough in order to get approval, or suffer enough, there's some subconscious story going on there. So with breaking martyrdom, a thing I like to remind people of is that there is never going to be a payoff. Never. And I can tell you this because I've lived it. There has never been a payoff to my martyrdom, and there never will be. And so I am slowly moving out of that now. But it has been a process, because there is such an intense sense that you owe people, that you will not be safe. And this is true sometimes with certain people. You will not be safe around them. So it's about like weeding people out. If they're not going to be on board with you, if you have to castrate yourself to be safe around someone, you get rid of that person. Don't get rid of your power, get rid of the person. And also just noticing if there's any projection happening. A lot of times people who are in martyrdom, they think that other people are like putting them there, when that's not always the case. It's not ever the case, because you have control. Ultimately, it's your energy, right? So if you have if you're in a relationship and someone says, I want to do this thing, and you're like, I don't want to do that, so then you feel like a martyr. You're like, I have to do that with that person, because if I don't, they're gonna abandon me. And it could be like that, like this is just this thing you're doing in your head, has nothing to do with them, right? So don't necessarily project that onto them. That's another side of this. And part of having power is self-responsibility. That's like the less fun part. The fun part is when you learn to start exercising this power all the time, and you start getting things that you want, because you're going after them directly. You're not a martyr anymore, right? So that's the fun part, like just getting things that you want. And that will happen naturally as you bring this energy back into your life. But the other part is also self-responsibility. Because, there's people out there, they just want to do the fun part, right? They just want to be hedonists and like manifest tons of money or something. Like that's like baby shit, right? That means there's no responsibility. So the dignity in this is not that I can have power over other people and manipulate them, and that's all the shadow side of this energy. The dignity in it is that I get to be me. Because without this sacral energy, you are not you fully. You might be mentally, you might be able to speak authentically, you might be able to think authentically, you might be able to do a lot authentically, but if it's not grounded down there in that energy center to where you literally feel that you are embodying power and that it is yours and that it cannot be manipulated out of your hands by some situation or some person, then you're just not fully there yet. And so that's just a practice, right? So it's something you practice over time, bringing that power back in. And so if you feel like everything in your life is hard won, that is a very good sign that you are lingering in this martyr energy. And it's not about fault. It's not your fault. You're not to blame. You don't need to like hustle, and it's not that. It's just drifting back toward that center of power. So if that's something that kind of you think hits home for you, you want to learn more about it, you want to start working on that yourself, check out the sessions link below, and I will see you next time.